Hi, my name is not Tony, and this is not Every Frame a Painting. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever been at home watching a movie, or maybe sitting in the theater with hundreds of other people watching a movie, and stopped to consider a question that's been gnawing at you? Just what is a movie? This won't be a boring video, I swear! What is a movie? Is it scripted media projected onto a screen at a movie theater? But Netflix makes tons of movies that they stubbornly refuse to release in the theaters. Just 6 months ago, they released Rebel Ridge, a very good movie that you can see and only see from the comfort of your own home. The bastards. Plus, when Game of Thrones was at its peak, HBO released a couple of its most cinematic episodes in theaters, and Game of Thrones was a TV show, not a movie. Maybe movies are moving images played back at 24 frames per second? They are called motion pictures after all. But again, TV shows are also played in 24p, and there have been many examples of movies being played at higher than 24 frames per second. Notably, we had Ang Lee's Gemini Man, which was made for a 120 frames per second presentation, but many theaters showed it at just 60 frames per second. And both the Hobbit trilogy and Avatar 2 Avatared Again were shown in 48 frames per second in some theaters. So, is a movie maybe just a narrative with various characters moving through a plot? No, not that. Definitely not that. Look, definitions are hard, but movies certainly aren't just narratives with various characters moving through various plots, because books have that too, and certain lyrical music, and even your partner telling you the exciting story of what happened to them at the grocery store has that. Blah 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 blah. In fact, all narratives have that, right? Let's get technical for just a little bit. Definitions, true definitions that specify what makes something what it is and distinct from everything else, are hard, especially in edge cases. For a true and proper definition of something, you need to specify both conditions that are necessary for the thing to be what it is, and sufficient. Okay, but what does that mean? Well, first, you need conditions that are necessary for the thing to be what it is. Conditions which must be met for the thing to be what it is. But then, you also need conditions that are sufficient for the thing to be what it is. Conditions which, just by being met, make the thing what it is. These two types of conditions can come apart. For example, it is a necessary condition of a thing being a movie that it be a series of images played back at some non-zero speed. Individual photos are just a collage after all, not a movie. But this condition isn't by itself sufficient for a thing to be a movie, because a series of images played back at, say, 2 frames a second is a slideshow, not a movie. And besides, TV shows are also a series of images played back at some non-zero speed. It's not enough for something to be a movie for it to be a series of images played back at some non-zero speed. We're almost done with the technical mumbo jumbo, bear with me a little longer. Ideally, you would want your definition to have a necessary condition which is also, by itself, sufficient. For example, the definition of water is just H2O. For something to be water, it is necessary for 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen molecule, and only those 3 molecules, to be bonded in a triangle. If we were to travel to another planet and find a liquid that behaves just like water, but the liquid is made up of newly discovered molecules X, Y, and Z, it is not water that we have found, for the liquid is not made up of H2O molecules. H2O molecules are necessary for a liquid to be water. They have to be there for a liquid to be water. They are also sufficient. All you need for something to be water is for H2O molecules to be present and bonded in a triangle. Nothing else is needed. Thus, in order to find water, you have to find H2O molecules bonded in a triangle, and as soon as you find that, you found water. H2O molecules bonded in a triangular structure are both necessary and sufficient for something to be water. Most things in this world, however, aren't so simply definable. Usually, you need to specify multiple necessary conditions which, when taken together as a group, are sufficient. Multiple conditions which are required to be met, and as soon as they are met together, you have the thing you're trying to define. This is likely the case with defining movies. Movies are a series of images played back at some non-zero speed. That's a necessary condition. But they also have audio played in sync with those images for at least some non-zero length of time. That's another necessary condition. And that audio has some relation to those images. It's not just a random, unrelated audio being played at the same time. That's another necessary condition. And we could go on like this for some time. But this isn't really a video about coming up with a definition for movies. That's right, I tricked ya, haha! We're actually gonna do something far more engaging, you fools! I don't want to spend this entire video trying to define what movies are because that's a very difficult, time-consuming, trivial, and above all, dry task. Definitions are hard, and at some point we would invariably get into some sort of shouting match over whether some piece of media counts as a movie. Do you all remember the greatly boring is a hot dog a sandwich discourse of 2018? Because the trickiness of definitions is how we got the greatly boring is a hot dog a sandwich discourse of 2018. Or was it 2019? Just what is time? No, we're not doing that. Anyway, we're not going to be coming up with a definition for movies, but I did want to start this video by discussing definitions to make a point. Movies aren't just characters going through a plot. That's not a sufficient condition for movies. All narratives have that to some extent or another. That may not even be a necessary condition for movies, since some experimental movies don't even have that. There are so many elements that make up a film, elements apart from characters moving through a plot. So then, why do so many of us reduce movies down to just their characters and plots? Why do we judge the quality of a movie just based on whether we connected to the characters and whether the story moved us? Why do we read the Wikipedia plot summary of a movie, the plot summary, not even a detailed description of everything that happened in the movie, and think that's the same thing as actually watching it? That we've gotten all we needed to just from reading what happened to who, and since we know that, there's not much point in watching the actual movie. Or, since we've already watched it once and know what happens, there's nothing new to be gained by rewatching it until we forget the main plot points and have the chance to be surprised again by what happens. Spoilers ruin our initial reactions to and gut punch moments of films, and you shouldn't spoil people who don't want to be spoiled. Don't rob them of those experiences. But why do so many think those experiences of shock and surprise are the only things worth experiencing in movies? That learning of spoilers ruins the whole point of watching the movie. The truth is that as much as movies are entertainment products made by corporations for the purposes of making money, they are also multimedia artistic endeavors. At the broadest level, movies are a fusion of moving images, relevant sounds, and a narrative glue that takes us from the first of those images and sounds to the last. But each of those three broad elements are constructed by hundreds of individual artists working on smaller parts within each element. When constructing the images, you have the actors who are positioned within the frames, you have set designers building the spaces they inhabit, location scouts who scout on location sets, the cinematographer, the CGI artist, and so many more. With the audio, you have, again, the actors who speak the lines, but also the Foley artists who create the sound effects, the composer who scores the movie, the sound mixes who mix all those elements together, and so on. With the narrative glue, you have the screenwriters, the story by ideas people, the director, even the producers and studio executives sometimes contribute to this element of the movie. And don't forget the editors! Everyone always forgets the editors. These aren't just awards categories at the Oscars, they are separate art forms worked on by individual artists who come together and combine their talents to create something that's not just a story, not just dialogue, not just music, not just dazzling visuals, but all those and more combined together into one package. The art form that combines all other art forms. Just as an aside, notice how all of what I've said so far also applies to TV shows. Almost like movies and TV shows are essentially the same thing, just different in how they're produced and presented. They're not substantially different art forms. Now, we typically judge art based on how it makes us feel.
I sense great vulnerability. A man-child crying out for love, an innocent orphan in the postmodern world.
I see a parasite.
He transcends time and space.
He sickens me.
I love it.
Me too.
And yes, plots and characters are incredible tools for making us feel. We laugh and cry by the characters, we wince and cheer by the plot. I don't mean to say that good plot and good characters aren't important, of course they are. But they aren't the only tools for making us feel. Again, movies contain a whole lot of artistic elements. Any one of those elements can inspire feelings within us. Some movies are masterpieces. They're at least good, often incredible at multiple elements, and bad at pretty much none. Across the Spider-Verse, for example, is a masterpiece. Miles' character and what he goes through in the movie make us feel, but so do the incredible visuals and score. I get misty-eyed every time I watch the Vulture fight at the beginning of the movie, just from the masterful artistry on display on so many levels. From the visuals, to the music, to the dialogue, to the... well, everything really. I mean, just watch it. And the movie never lets up on that artistry throughout its runtime. Yes, its story is incomplete and needs to be finished in the third movie. Some people dock it points because of that and say that final judgment on the quality of the film cannot be made until its story concludes in the third movie. Then and only then, they say, can we properly judge the quality of this second film in the trilogy. But even if the third movie fumbles the ball and is a big smelly turd, I don't think that would detract from the incredible multimedia artistry of Across the Spider-Verse itself. The second movie would still be a masterpiece, no matter how its story ultimately finishes in the third movie. Or take Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, another certified masterpiece, few people dispute that. Yet, it doesn't exactly have intricate plotting or insightful character arcs, does it? Right from the very beginning, you know things aren't going to go too well for the Torrance family. As soon as the hotel manager says the last caretaker got cabin fever and brutally killed his wife and 2 daughters, you know Jack is going to end up attempting to do the same. A couple of scenes later, he's already starting to lose it. But none of that matters. The experience of watching the movie is still incredible. The set design, the camera work, the audio. My god, the audio. When things start to go off the rails and the heartbeats kick in.
Get him out of here. You mean just leave the hotel?
As I said, some movies are masterpieces. But most movies are just of average quality. Yet even within average movies, you can find incredibly moving elements that inspire us to feel certain things. I think that we as the audience need to expand our vocabulary and our minds when it comes to judging movies, because movies aren't just good or bad. That's too simple. Some movies are good to great in all their constituting elements. Most, however, are mixed. They can have some great elements and some absolutely awful ones. They can have some okay elements and some incredible ones. They can be awful in all but one element, and so on. What I'm trying to say is that there are multiple angles from which we can judge movies, because there are multiple elements within movies which can make us feel, which can move us and affect us and engage with us. Movies can be good and bad in multiple ways at the same time. Considering the merits of individual elements of movies isn't just something for award shows to do. As a movie-watching audience, we also should pay more attention to how those elements affect us. Doing so can help us appreciate a broader range of movies, and it can even help us get something out of movies that we otherwise don't think are very good. Movie watching is an experience that encompasses more than just what happens to who and when. So let's engage with them as such. For the rest of this video, I want to talk about a few movies to continue exploring this approach to watching them. Not all the following are good movies, quote unquote, but they're all movies that have something going for them, regardless of the quality of their plots and characters. They have some exceptional element. Many of them have multiple exceptional elements. So let's start with... When Mortal Engines originally came out in theaters back in 2018, I, alongside millions of other people, didn't watch it. It only made $83 million against a budget of $100 to $150 million. But last year, I finally got around to seeing it. And folks, let me tell you, it's not very good. But hold on, I'm not here to slap simple good or not good labels on movies. That's the exact opposite of the point of this video. Folks, I won't lie to you. Every single line of dialogue in this movie was taken straight out of the big book of cliches. Every single one. I would show you a supercar right now, but then I would just be showing you the whole movie, and YouTube would nuke my channel from orbit. Just take my word for it. The dialogue and the plot and the characters are all riddled with so many cliches, your eyes will fall out of their sockets from you rolling them so much that the optic nerves twist and pitch themselves off. I'm blind now, these are plastic eyes. But the visuals. Oh boy, the visuals of this movie are a treat. Every frame's a painting. Just gorgeous stuff. And then we get to the Shrike. So cool! The composition, the contrast of the green eyes against the blues, the movement, the shriek. Just change the audio to a foreign language you don't understand and turn off the subtitles. Let your imagination come up with a better story and dialogue for what all those gorgeous images mean. Like when you were a little kid and didn't fully understand what your favorite cartoons were all about. But boy did those images captivate you, boy did they bring out feelings in you. No, Mortal Engines isn't a quote-unquote good movie, but that doesn't mean it has no merits whatsoever. We can, and I think should, celebrate it for what it does do incredibly well. I don't like to give star ratings to movies, because that simplifies the judgment of movies in exactly the ways I'm arguing against in this video. Lately, I've been considering a different approach to rating them. Tier lists. Every movie is ranked along two axes. The overall quality, ranked as either S, A, mid, or trash, and an optional second, looser list with custom named tiers which engage with the movie on a deeper level. I would rank Mortal Engines as mid-tier and also as best movie to watch in a foreign language with no subtitles, because the visuals alone are just that good. Maybe there's something to this tier list idea. It could be a whole website dedicated to logging movies you watched, and you would look at your friends' profiles to compare your movie taste with theirs. We could call it Tierific. Tierific? I've got it. Dude, what's your tier? Dude, what's your tier? Copyright, trademark. Now, Mad Max Fury Road is, in my very humble opinion, an S-tier movie. Controversial, I know, but the movie's always been criticized by some people for having a very thin plot. The whole thing is just a chase in one direction, then a chase in the other direction, they say. That's a major flaw of the movie, they say. I don't agree. I don't think the plot is very complex, but I also don't think that's a flaw. But I'm not alone in thinking this, so I won't spend too much time discussing Fury Road here. Let's just say that even if you think the movie's simple plot is a flaw, there's still no denying the powerful movie watching experience that is this movie. Impeccably made action, visuals, music, sound effects, it's all mwah. Here's an example of a masterpiece which excels in a whole lot of areas, and the one area it's weakest in, namely the plot and maybe the characters, is still very much fine at worst. At worst! I was blown away by the movie the first time I watched it in the theater. Second time I watched it, I had tears in my eyes during the sandstorm sequence. Not because I was watching it in 4DX and my seat was spitting sand in my face, no, but because I was overwhelmed by how awesome the sequence was and how such incredibly talented people had made it. I thought to myself, I'm never gonna get to make a Hollywood movie. I'm a puppet. But even if I did, I could never make something this good. The power of sound and visuals. It's not a new insight to say that Michael Bay Transformers movies have awful characters and terrible plots. I actually think the plot of the first movie is fine, it's serviceable, it does its job, even if it doesn't present the Transformers in the same way fans of the animated show and movie are used to, you know, the same way that made them into fans in the first place. So I think the plot is fine, but even I can admit the first movie doesn't have good characters, and I won't even try to defend the rest of the Bayformers movies either. But the first movie, well, it has some things going for it. If you can tune out the characters and cringe humor, it does do some things really well. Things that make me glad the movie exists. Things that make me, and notice I'm here just talking about my own preferences, rather rewatch this movie than, say, the 2018 Bumblebee movie, which has infinitely better characters. characters. I remember the first time I saw the cop car Decepticon transform and yell hysterically at Shia LaBeouf's character. I had goosebumps. I still do every time I rewatch the film. Would I rather that moment be in a movie with great characters and an excellent plot? Absolutely. But we don't have that movie, we have this one, and its plot and characters are tolerable enough that I can withstand them for this moment. And then there's also this. Wow. The audio, the cinematography, the CGI, all impeccable. The angle contrasting the little human with the fighter jet transformer, incredible. In that moment, for those 3 seconds, I'm a believer in the Michael Bay Transformers. Too bad, the rest of the Bayformers are stinky, moldy, half-liquefied garbage at the bottom of the trash tier. Okay, I lied. The opening moon sequence in the third one is alright. And there is a single shot in the fourth film that's pretty good too. But don't even watch that one in a foreign language with no subtitles. Just don't watch it and save yourself 165 minutes. I already showed you it's 7 seconds of good visuals. I'll keep this one brief because I don't have much new to say here. Is Megalopolis a good movie? I don't know. Probably not. But I'm at least glad that I saw it. Several shots and sequences did make me feel. I won't show them here because I want you to experience them within the context of the movie, if you decide to watch it. But if I'm starting to convince you to start appreciating more in movies than just plot and characters, then Megalopolis is good homework for practicing that. Ignore the 46% Rotten Tomatoes score and the 35% audience score, and watch the movie yourself. See how it makes you feel. Maybe you'll find no redeeming qualities in it whatsoever. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll end up saying, okay, well, that wasn't good, but at least I liked that part, or that creative choice, or that element of it, and ultimately, I'm glad that I saw it. About a year ago, my best friend and I started watching The French Connection, wholly independently of each other. I started watching it, and quite coincidentally, he started watching it too on his own in his own home. Down in front. After half an hour, we were both very confused. What was happening? Who were these people? What were they doing? Why were they doing it? And what was at stake? The movie just wasn't doing it for us. He decided to turn it off and move on with his life. I considered turning it off, but then I thought, well, I've got nothing better to do tonight. Might as well keep watching. And besides, I've always gotten a sort of ASMR-like enjoyment out of old school audio fidelity resulting from inferior mics. Every clink of glass, every click of the mouth as the actors speak tickles my brain.
And the guy in the striped shirt and tie combo. I know him too.
Thought we came here to buy me a drink.
I was at least enjoying that aspect of the movie, which is ironic because I meticulously scrub my own mouth clicks. I hate hearing my own mouth noises in recordings. Then, as I kept watching The French Connection, something happened. I started to like the movie. Started to really like the movie. It's a great movie! The characters started to make sense, the plot became propulsive, there are some truly hilarious sequences in there, and then that chase scene. Oh, that chase scene, my word. Next time we met, I told my friend about the movie, he told me about his experience trying to watch it, and we laughed at the fact that we both considered turning it off after exactly half an hour. He said he would give it another try, and he did. And he also ended up liking it a lot. Now, I'm not saying anything new by praising this movie. I'm not the first one to say, hey, the director of The Exorcist made a great crime thriller that you should totally watch. It's on Disney+. But what I am saying is this. The plot and characters, at least initially, put both my friend and I off. But one of us kept watching, at least partly because some other element in the movie, namely the sound design, was something to latch onto. Then, as the movie continued to unfold, it showed itself to be a great movie. By the end, the plot, the characters, the sound design, the visuals all came together to make it one hell of an S-tier movie watching experience. Go watch The French Connection. It's on Disney+. Then also watch I Saw the TV Glow. Sadly, not on Disney+. This one I'll also keep brief, because the movie is new and I don't want to spoil anything even by just showing footage from its trailers. This was another movie which I did not initially connect with. For the first quarter to third of the film, I recognized that it was a well-made movie, but it just wasn't connecting with me. But I kept watching, partly because it was highly regarded and I had learned my lesson from The French Connection, but also partly because the neon colors in the visuals were pleasing to look at. Then the visuals and audio design cranked up to 11. Then I started connecting with the the plot and characters. By the time the movie ended, I was devastated for the main character, both within the context of the movie, but also metatextually in how their experiences relate to real people in real life. This movie stayed with me long after the credits ended. Those eyes, those damned eyes. Some people hate this movie, my best friend included, and I get it. Plot barely there, characters even less there, but I thoroughly enjoyed all of its set pieces. Just so fun. I don't know if I'll ever rewatch it, maybe in 20 years when I've completely forgotten all about it, but I'm glad that I experienced it once. Just so fun. Actually, what I'm talking about in this video only applies to the last two movies in the trilogy, the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy. Shame they didn't make any more Pirates movies, eh? Or maybe, good thing that they didn't make any more Pirates movies, so we wouldn't have to suffer through any bad Pirates movies, eh? Eh? No, but seriously, the Pirates trilogy rocks. Everyone loves the first movie, but everyone seems to not love the second and third movies. They say Jack Sparrow becomes too grating, that he shouldn't have been a major character. They say the movies are bloated and there's too much mythology crammed into them and the plot is too convoluted and the characters are hard to connect to, and you know what I say to those people watching this video right now? These two movies are awesome! Yes, perhaps the plot and characters aren't as tightly written as they were in the first movie. Mayhaps there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in these two sequels, but all those stuff make for an incredible movie watching experience. I've rewatched the first Pirates movie maybe once. I've rewatched the second and third like 4 or 5 times, and I plan to watch them many more times to come. Here are 2 more movies where the incredible visuals and sound design and yes, even the generally fine plot and characters bring me so much joy. Such pleasures to experience. All of the Davy Jones stuff, Goosebumps producing good. Tom Hollander as Lord Cutler Beckett, incredible performance. The Kraken, hello beastie. The water wheel chase, and masterclass in filmmaking. Then there's the final battle in the middle of a freaking Maelstrom! And so much more. These movies truly make me feel like I'm living the life of a swashbuckling pirate in a mythologically rich fantasy world, without having to deal with any of the risks and dangers of actually living the life of a swashbuckling pirate in a mythologically rich fantasy world. They have great visuals and sound design, and I think the plot and characters are also neat. But in any case, at worst, they're serviceable. At the very worst, if a masterpiece has multiple great elements and no truly awful elements, then I have no shame in declaring Dead Man's Chest and At World's End 2 certified masterpieces. Definitely S tier. Could the story and characters be better? Absolutely. Do they sink the ship? Pun intended? Absolutely not. Truly masterpieces. Debate me. Wait, actually, debate me after this next segment, because a lot of the same things I just said also apply to the 3 Hobbit movies. Yes, I know what you're gonna say. These movies are trash! Why am I even watching this trash video made by a trash puppet who has obviously trash opinions? But hear me out. Maybe the Hobbit trilogy would have been better as only 2 films, like they were originally planned to be. Maybe the Guillermo del Toro duology would have been better than the 3 films Peter Jackson and his returning collaborators made. But there's the rub. Returning collaborators. Pretty much all the same artists who worked in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which everyone and their mom declares to be untouchable masterpieces, also worked in the Hobbit trilogy. And sure, it's technically possible for all the same artists who made 3 S-tier movies adapting Tolkien's great novel to then come back and make 3 trash-tier movies adapting Tolkien's other great novel. But I posit that's less likely than the alternative. That alternative being that they did not suddenly lose their ability to make good movies. They just made 3 less good movies. The Hobbit trilogy is not as good as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Just at the fundamental level, it could not have been as good, and it is not as good. The Hobbit story doesn't revolve around the same compelling battle between good and evil. The plot feels a lot more segmented, with a single through line of helping the dwarves reclaim their homeland, being divided into tangentially related obstacles they have to overcome, like levels in a video game or even disparate chapters in a kid's adventure story. Wink wink, winky winky. The Hobbit trilogy doesn't have the same thematic and emotional depths as the Rings trilogy. You won't even remember the names of half the dwarves in the story.
Kili, Moin, Loin, Malin, Bomber, Dore, Nori, not my prize, Ori. You appear to be 1 dwarf short.
But like the second and third Pirates movies, the Hobbit movies combine incredible visuals and sound design with, at worst, serviceable plot and characters to give you the indelible experience of traveling through Middle-earth. spending more time in it with all its sights and sounds and dangerous adventures, all from the comfort and safety of their own comfortable and safe home. Not that these movies have bad plots and characters, I said at worst serviceable. I personally think they're fine to even good. But even if you can't bring yourself to connect with the plight of the Dwarven refugees trying to reclaim their lost home, or the maturing of Bilbo through his many brushes with death, or the growing shadow at Dol Guldur that has Gandalf worried, there's at least the experience of being in Middle-earth to enjoy. 3 8-tier movies. Not every great story has to be about the triumph of the light against the ever-encroaching darkness. Not every great story has to be about the indelible bonds of friendship helping you do the impossible. Sometimes it's great to just be at a dinner party with a gang of dwarves. But I didn't always think this. I first saw the trilogy in the theater as each movie came out. I remember liking the first one for letting me spend the fun time in Middle-earth, hearing the dwarves sing in Bilbo's kitchen and watching Elrond speak with Gandalf against the gorgeous crimson sky and playing a game of riddles with Gollum and ... But the second and third films felt confusing and inconsequential, and I was uncomfortable in my theater seat, and the 48 frames per second presentation had lost its novelty, and I ended up liking the sequence with Smaug and tuning everything else out from the last 2 movies. Last year, however, after watching the extended Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time, I also watched the extended Hobbit trilogy for the first time. And watching those extended editions, none of which last longer than 3 hours, which is nothing in today's world of sometimes 3+ hours, from the comfort of my own home made me truly appreciate them for what they are. The visuals are gorgeous, apart from the distracting sheen on certain surfaces in the first and third movies from the extra lights they had to use to light the 48 frames per second presentation. The sound design is immense in Smaug and the Necromancer and Mirkwood and in other little touches here and there. There are genuinely fun sequences, like the dinner at Bilbo's house and the dwarves singing in Rivendell and the barrel ride. Yes, I said it, the barrel ride. That's a fun little sequence, what can I say? When did we as a society forget how to have fun? The ultra-sincere and thus often cringe-inducing elf and dwarf love subplot lasts maybe 15 minutes max in a trilogy that's close to 9 hours? That's nothing, and it even ties back into one of the themes of this story. Radagast the Brown is a loopy stoner with bird poop on his hat, okay, and the dwarves start singing in multiple scenes? Just once I'd like to be at a party where Thorin Oakenshield's company of dwarves starts singing, and this trilogy lets me be at multiple such parties. Maybe the trilogy would have been better as 2 movies. But what we have is this trilogy, and the trilogy we have, in its extended form, is a pretty darn good experience. When watched at home, and not on the phone, and with no distractions, put the TikTok away! Transport yourself to Middle-earth sometime, it's fun, there's pipeweed, and mountains that punch each other. There are some who dislike David Lynch's movies because they seem random and it's hard to follow their plot logic, and it sometimes feels like weird stuff just happen for the sake of weird stuff happening. Other people like them because they feel like puzzle boxes to be solved, with real mystery and ambiguity that open up room for multiple interpretations of what's happening and what it all means. And still other people approach David Lynch's movies in the way encouraged by David Lynch, as experiences that elicit emotions and meanings and feelings. How do his movies make you feel? How do the seemingly random, weird, illogical stuff in them reconcile themselves in your psyche as you watch them happen? Maybe you feel confused and irritated, yes, but maybe you also feel fear and pity for a psychotic drug kingpin. Or maybe you feel off-kilter and tense, but also oddly seduced by a southern cowboy vaguely threatening you in some deserted Hollywood backland. Or maybe you feel abject terror and stomach-churning anxiety at a random woman yelling about her sick son while stuck in traffic.
Please, ma'am.
What are you doing? We're trying to get home. We're already late. Her uncle is joining us. She hasn't seen him in a very long while. We're late. Oh God!
David Lynch has said his method for crafting stories is like going fishing. You sit there and wait, then feel the slight tug of the line and slowly reel in an idea. Then that idea, that fragment, that single fish becomes bait for more ideas that you fish. Then at some point enough ideas have been caught that you can piece together the whole puzzle. Okay, the analogy kind of breaks down at the end there, but the point is that for Lynch, creating art isn't to rely on a blueprint put to paper with black ink. It's a much more intuitive exercise, an instinctual and emotive exercise, rather than a logical one. In every scene, in every moment, Lynch wants to evoke a certain feeling in you, and he accomplishes that through a multitude of tools, from dialogue to plot to sound to visuals. And your enjoyment of his movies largely depend on whether you're willing to let his filmmaking make you feel those things, or whether you insist that every scene logically and directly and straightforwardly connect to the next. What meaning you draw out from those feelings is up to you. He never insisted on a certain interpretation of his work. What mattered to him was that you experience his work. His movies are about more than just plot and characters. Much more. Much more. Much. The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford isn't just a very badly search engine optimized title, it's also an S-tier western. But it's a slow, methodical western. Light on action, light on plot, heavy on characters. If you watch it late at night after a long day's work, you will fall asleep. Works better than any sleeping pill currently on the market. But if you're rested enough to be able to pay attention, there is something in the movie that can help bring you along on the slow character study ride. An incredible cinematography by the incomparable Roger Deakins. And the slow nature of the narrative helps you luxuriate in the images he projects onto your screen. Just incredible stuff. It even inspired me to take similar looking pictures on a camping trip I went on many years ago, taken through the lens of a pair of binoculars. I'm just sitting by, watching the clock, waiting patiently for the 4K release of the film. And finally, we have... Okay, let's be honest. This movie is not a good movie. Its characters are thin, its plot is cliched sci-fi, not a particularly interesting sound design, the visuals are often dull, Hugh Jackman is horribly miscast as the villain, Dev Patel has nothing to do, its action sequences aren't terribly exciting, I'll never rewatch it. But you know what? You know what it does have? Sharlto Copley as Chappie.
Hello, I'm Chappie.
I like Sharlto Copley, and he's Chappie.
Chappie's got a book.
I'm glad that I watched Sharlto Copley be Chappie.
Chappie be the rudest bad boy, streetwise professor in Joburg, fuck mother! Yes!
That's it. That's all I've got. Kinda a weak way to end the segment. Okay then, how about... Take it away, David. Movies aren't just characters moving through a plot. Multiple elements combine to create a movie, from elements of sound to visuals to, yes, a narrative glue that holds everything together. I think we would all do well to keep that in mind when watching and rewatching movies. That movies can make us feel in more ways than one, along more dimensions than one. And that there's more to what makes a movie good or bad, more to what makes a movie worth experiencing than just characters moving through a plot. By the by, the same is true about other art forms too. Everything I've said about movies in this video also applies to TV shows, obviously, since they're very similar art forms. The Legion TV show, for example, didn't always have successful plots and characters, but my word did it have striking visuals and sequences. It just kept trying things that are still uncommon on TV today, let alone on cable back when it first came out. And when looking at paintings, you can look at the whole image and see how that makes you feel, but you can also get granular and consider things like the brush strokes, how pointillism makes you feel versus oil on canvas versus watercolors versus... In books, you can dive deep into plots and characters, but you also have the prose. Shakespeare is still read today not just because of the stories he crafted, but also because of the way he put his sentences together and the way his plays read and sound. A video game can be judged based on its gameplay loop, but also its story and lore, its sound design, its controls, its graphical presentation. Even something as seemingly inconsequential as the color chosen for the user interface can have an impact on how we feel, and thus how we come to appreciate the game. So next time you're watching a movie, just watch it as you normally would, and see how it makes you feel. You don't need to force yourself to analyze every element of it as you're watching it for the first time. Let your first experience just be the experience of you watching it. But then, after you're done watching it, consider if any scenes or sequences had any merits besides the plot and characters. Whether anything else in the experience of watching the movie stood out to you. Whether any other elements made you feel. And on subsequent rewatches, you might perhaps start to pay more attention to those other elements. And maybe, just maybe, you'll eventually start to find art worth paying attention to even in otherwise bad movies. Maybe you'll start to see the forest and the trees, because forests can be beautiful, sure, but even ugly forests can contain some very beautiful trees. If you like this video, please hit that like and subscribe button for more content. For small channels like this one, such small actions make a huge difference in how the YouTube algorithm treats my videos. Hit me up in the comments below and tell me about a movie that you love even though it doesn't have the best plot or characters. What is it that you love about it? Or what about the movies that I discussed in this video? Do you want me to make a deep dive about any of them, critiquing them in more detail than I included here? Thank you for watching to the very end, and I'll see you next time in...